Okay, let me take this time to welcome everybody to our class for today. I just want an indication. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
Bob.
perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Um, Today we are on chapter 12. And chapter 12 is linked to the chapter that we covered yesterday, which is the chapter on performance management. But chapter 12 kind of takes a link with this chapter by focusing more on the aspects related to compensation. And when we talk about aspects related to compensation, we're not only referring to money, but we are also talking about compensation that is related to non monetary benefits, and how they link with efforts regarding performance. And so we are going to look into the chapter, paying attention to those aspects of the monetary and the non monetary. We are also going to consider what the law says with regards to how people are paid. Um, what I always find interesting with this chapter is every time we teach this chapter, there's always consensus and understanding of the importance of um, compensation within organizations, but there's also the realization of the challenges that compensation systems create, particularly with regards to issues of equity, particularly with regard to issues of fairness. And this has led to compensation often being seen as a very contentious aspect of the experience of being a person within the organization. We're also going to pay attention to then how we can establish this fairness, how we can establish this equity, particularly on matters related to compensation. And so let's get straight into it by talking to why we pay people. Why is it that at the end of the month you get a salary from your employer, or what makes that salary or compensation output be deemed to be fair, be deemed to be acceptable, or its objective in totality with the organizational aspirations. So the first of those elements that we can look at concerns issues related to how adequate the compensation is. Um, if I were to ask in the class, and I'm not going to ask for students to speak if they are happy with how much they are being paid, a lot of responses I know would not center very well on some form of happiness around what somebody is being paid. So what happens a lot is that people within organizations are really confined and constricted to questions around how much should we be paying a particular employee. And often the answer is dependent not just on one factor, but a range of factors. And these factors deserve attention. Some of these factors that influence how much we should be paying people are factors that are external to the organization. Some of these factors are determined through government intervention. Some of these factors are determined through industry led processes of negotiation. Some of these factors are led through bargaining councils at various sectors or levels. And so, what influences what is deemed to be a fair compensation or fair compensation is really dependent on these external factors. The second issue, which influences compensation, concerns more internal factors. these internal factors are really specific to what is actually happening inside the organization. Internal factors also differ, and they range from different types of factors. These are factors specific to the nature of the job that is being conducted. So, a pilot flying an aeroplane and a bus driver driving a bus would ultimately have the same outcome, which is to get people from one point to the other. But due to the level of complexity involved in the different types of tasks that are involved, the salaries would be somewhat different. And that must also be something that should be taken into consideration. The organizational strategy plays a part in also influencing the internal dynamics that influence the compensation system, including the financial position of the business. So, where business is not able to pay its employees or is not able to offer competitive salaries, what will usually happen there is that you will find that they will communicate that, and often because of the challenges around making ends meet, uh, because of the challenges of making ends meet, you'll find that a lot of the companies would then try and be clear on what they can and cannot negotiate. You often hear people talk about you're working for company A and you go and get an offer in another company, and then you try to negotiate what they call a counter offer. It works sometimes. Numisa, please mute your microphone. Uh, it, it works sometimes, but often there's always a threshold in terms of what can be negotiated or what cannot be negotiated. So, what is deemed adequate is determined by internal and external factors. The second most important thing about what is deemed adequate, or what compensation objectives strive for within an organization, concerns how equitable the compensation plan is in itself. So each person is paid fairly in line with the requirements of their effort. So are we paying for performance? In other words, what you put in is what you get. And this works very well, particularly with jobs where you want to keep people motivated. You want to keep people constantly working towards objectives and targets. So the system of payment, which is linked to the effort, ability, or the skill of a person, becomes important. There's also consideration for internal and external aspects related to equity. Internally, the company may make a decision to give more preference to women candidates and candidates from designated groups. And as a result, we would like that to be reflected in its quest for equity. Compensation is also thought to be balanced, and here is where we're talking about the necessity of a wide repertoire of reward mechanisms that can be given to a person. This includes not just a fair wage in terms of a salary, but also other benefits that may accompany the experience. These benefits could be monetary, and they could be non-monetary. These benefits could be things that are intrinsic, internal to a person, and these benefits could also be things that are extrinsic, which are important or external to the person. But what we also agree upon is that compensation should be cost effective. In other words, whatever we are paying in terms of our overall contribution is usually based on the expenditure of the organization, reflecting more in its effort of having a policy that dictates how much it is paying, and also the effort expended in view of what is the benefit to the organization. So, put simply, If an organization is finding itself in a situation where it's not able to pay its people well, or it's got challenges around how people are performing, that organization needs to be very careful, because what usually would happen in such a case is the challenge related to issues of making sure that we have some form of ROI, which is this term that means return on investment. In other words, what we are putting in is what we are getting out, in terms of the process of making sure that our employees are adequately and sufficiently doing what they're supposed to do. There's also emphasis on performance, and we've spoken about this when we spoke about the importance of performance being seen to be balanced. But in this case, we are paying attention more to the context of work and making sure that the people who are working for us are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and we are realizing whatever benefit we're supposed to be realizing. It's gotten to an extreme, if you like, in some organizations where people have to clock in when they arrive at work, and the clocking in system is used as just as a way of saying, we know you came to work, because I think the Daily Dispatch yesterday, or the day before, reported of an interesting case where the Buffalo City municipality had been losing lots of money to absenteeism. In other words, people were not coming to work. And as people were not coming to work, what that subsequently meant is that there was a loss being realized based on this issue of absenteeism. And basically, what the municipality was trying to just argue here is that they needed to find ways of making sure that they adequately control for issues related to high absenteeism, because it was subsequently costing them as an entity, or as a government organization tasked with the responsibility of delivering services to its people. So compensation, again, this can appear a bit of an unavoidable or a questionable trend, must be deemed to be acceptable. Again, it links with the first question of how adequate is adequate. And so the question we could ask here is, how acceptable is acceptable? At least within the confines of people, there must be an acceptable threshold to say, okay, I may not get enough at work, but I have enough to keep me going, paying my bills, and to be able to do all the other things that I do. So there must be not, it must not only be adequate, but it must also be acceptable to the employee in relative demand to the type of bills that they have to concur with. And then we take you a little bit back to your first year, where we introduced theories of motivation, which were split according to a range of activities. We had theories specific to the needs of people. And the most basic of those theories, which you will know about, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Another theory that's important to understanding needs is what's known as Herzberg's two-factor theory. Herzberg's two-factor theory. In the two-factor theory, Herzberg argues for two important factors as critical in the motivation of individuals to be able to do tasks and take part in certain responsibilities. The first of those factors rather, is known as the hygiene factors, and the second of those factors is known as the motivator factors. The hygiene factors are those factors that are found in the environment or the context in which the work is happening in. This could include teams in the organization and how they work together. This could include efforts of making sure that the environment in itself is in a position, is in a state that is conducive to allow for work to happen. And the second of the factors are motivator factors. And this gives us attention to the specific needs and attention that an individual would have in view of the challenges that they are going through. So motivators factors speak more to the individual. The hygiene factors speak more to the context in which the individual operates in. So Hesberg would argue that if you want to increase pay, you would have to not directly motivate an individual, but that if pay is deemed to be inadequate or mismatched with the employee needs, dissatisfaction is likely to happen. And so this input by Hesberg proffers some form of understanding to the challenges of the payment system, because what it simply means is that adequate pay must be accompanied by an address of issues related to the needs an employee has, and also issues related to the context in which the employee works in, particularly considering hygiene factors, and also the second one being motivator factors, which are those ones specific to the individual. We then take you to an interesting aspect, which is then the aspect related to income security. Income security. Income security is really deemed or defined as that amount of money which is earned by the effort that is put in by the individual. The money comes in and in the form of an income, and the existence of minimum income or wage regulations is becoming very popular, because what they are discovering is that there must be a pattern and some form of need of making sure that, especially in some sectors, we have a predetermined way of ensuring that there is a certain wage that people need to have. And this helps particularly those people who are vulnerable and are not able to negotiate for themselves what they really, really want, but are dependent on the role of their employee bodies to be able to assist them in the process. So this is known as the minimum income negotiation process. We also have an inclusion of non-wage benefits. These are issues not necessarily directed to the money or the income that you are getting in, but these are issues that can come with benefits as part of employment. So for instance, as part of employment, you could be asked, you need to be in a certain area, and you must adhere to that, because it's also part of those things that we spoke about the other day, which are the compensable factors. In other words, those factors that make you get paid the amount of money that you get. And finally, the number of people who rely on the income can be used as a determining factor of how much you can earn. So the HR team, when you've been afforded the job, can ask you a question to say, please tell us the number of dependents that you have, children that you have, your spouse, what they do for a living. And they do all that to see where they can try and accommodate and assist a person who may be coming, especially to a university context, and they are not able to consider for themselves issues that are specific to their job, but also issues that are specific to the context in which they are living in. So a person can argue that I have 7 dependents on the salary, and it is envisaged that this becomes a process through which some form of negotiation can happen to try and assist the person to get a better income. So the next question we can then ask is, how then do we develop a pay system? How then do we develop a pay system? And in developing a pay system, we need to first talk about the different forms of equity that accompany a pay system. These different forms of equity are really positions of consideration that determines the fairness of pay. These are factors in the environment or the internal environment. That's the most immediate environment to the organization. This is also factors that are outside the environment. The fairness here is on organizations that are used as benchmark to say, I want to work at a particular level of aspiration by considering how other organizations approach the issue of pay. But also remember, different folks for different folks. So some organizations would do well in this regard, others would struggle somewhat a little bit. We also consider the individual, the needs of the individual, and how they can assist in making sure that some form of equity is arrived at in terms of the contribution that they make. Now, this is often met with difficulty because sometimes people are not really open and transparent to how much they get. They prefer this to be a secret matter. But fairness really then must also consider how well you are paying this individual relative to other individuals within the organization. So in developing a pay system, we then rely on a number of important information. If you remembered, when we started, we spoke about the job analysis. This is followed by other steps which are internal, such as identifying characteristics or compensable factors, the creation of a standardized job evaluation, the establishment of grades. These are sometimes very common in certain organizations where somebody can ask you, what grade are you? And the idea of a grade is then used as a way of just making sure that we've got students of a similar grouping being there, or workers of a similar grouping being there and being used as a way of classifying that. We expect a person who does A, B, C, and D to exhibit the following characteristics, because these are the characteristics specific to the grade that they're working in. The second aspect of consideration is the external equity, which really the main argument there is that we must be engaged in twofold process of conducting a pay survey. And number two, we must be able to determine the movement of people between grades in them being able to achieve whatever objectives that they are trying to achieve. We then go to the third and final aspect, which is related to the issue of individual equity, where we try to determine the level and form of performance pay that we are exposed to. We then determine the benefits that are to be offered. We then determine the individual pay levels, also considering the two stages that we have covered. It's interesting if you were to be in a context of negotiation where these issues of compensation are being discussed. All of what we've spoken about so far, it sounds very theoretical, but there has to be an aspect of balance in the form of assisting employees, particularly from the exploitation that happens in the labor market. So we look at the different types of pay systems. The first one we look at are bonuses or benefits. Benefits usually are those indirect forms of compensation attributed to the link that you have by being an organizational member. These benefits may include compulsory benefits, voluntary benefits, and cash benefits. Compulsory benefits simply means everybody in the organization must make a decision as to the issue of benefits. Number two, voluntary benefits are those that work in a more a la carte type of system where employees have a choice to be able to choose the type of benefit that they want, and then they then tailor make it to suit the pockets. If there are going to be deductions, that it suits the context that they want to benefit from. And then the last step or the last type of benefits are cash benefits, which are usually linked with regard to the relationship that you have with employment. And so we then say, okay, this is how long the person has been with us. We must introduce some form of benefit that accrues with the level of experience that a person has with the particular organization. Compulsory benefits are those that are enshrined within acts of law. In other words, it is mandatory that employees or employers rather are consulting labor legislation to be able to integrate all of these aspects. This simply means the examples there are the UIA, the Unemployment Insurance Act, the Accident Insurance Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act, the aspects related to leave, which may include or is enshrined within the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So these aspects related to leave, which are compulsory, can include and not limited to annual leave, sick leave, maternity leave, family responsibility leave, and public holidays as possible leave dates. We then go to the voluntary benefits. Remember, these are the ones that people can choose to say, okay, we want to work on A, B, C, and D. Unfortunately, these are all dependent on sometimes the level of contribution that happens between the employer and the employee. These include your pension, these include medical aid, these include your motor vehicle and the use of a motor vehicle. These include meals and cafeteria allowance. I mean, if you were to look at this one, you could ask questions to say, how many times do people prefer and opt to use the benefits that are enshrined within the cafeteria system as a way of also cushioning against the harsh realities of a very strong economy that limits them. So there is necessity there in understanding the role that meals and cafeteria benefits apply to, particularly in a context of hardship. And other employers offer housing as a voluntary benefit that can be presented to employees as part of the relationship of employment. If you're not happy, you then can have cash benefits, which are more monetary, a fixed annual bonus. For some people, it's usually in December. For some people, they say it will be paid on your birthday month. So if June is your birthday, and your workplace will be able to pay to you based on the birthday month idea. Payment is also for overtime, payment for accumulated leave, shift allowance, a car allowance, tool and equipment allowance, and a standby allowance. So just be aware of these things and ask yourself a question. At the current stage where I am I fully aware of the range of benefits that I can benefit from that are being deducted against my name? We then go to why we have benefits in the first place. We have benefits so that we can cultivate or inculcate a culture that is of health and mental well-being. We have researched these areas, particularly looking at the type of benefits that people want. And the research appears to be suggesting that people are driven not just by one set of objectives, but people love a range of objectives, be they cash benefits. I know we also started with issues related to understanding adequacy and equity of pay, but all of these help us to be able to learn and be able to tailor make a package that is conducive for the effort the employee is putting in. Benefits also allow us to foster the node that we have within, particularly looking at encouraging healthy lifestyle and complete well-being. Through the money that you earn, you are able to determine the lifestyle that you are going to follow. Benefits, therefore, encourage financial security. They encourage issues of work-life balance. They encourage positive experiences, not just for the customer, but also for the employee. And if you like, the relationship between the employee and the employer is exactly the same as the relationship between a customer and a person who works for the particular brand who's offering the service. We also move away from benefits and start to talk about incentives. Incentives are rewards that are given to people as a basis of good performance or good work outcomes. These are often used as a way of complementing what is already in existence through the normal pay, but with an incentive provided. So the reward of an increase in pay must also then be valued and supported by other support mechanisms, which not only provide us a platform of comparison, but also provide us a way of trying to keep people motivated, depending on the differences that they have in that particular context. There must also be a clear link between what has been done in terms of the performance and also the payment that must happen. Often we are caught in a situation where two different employees who work in the same organization, who are productive in different ways, would often be caught saying, well, I'm not happy with the way I've been paid, especially given the effort that I put in. But what we can, if we go back here, we can actually see, well, sometimes effort is differentiated by differences that people have in terms of, it's a very subjective and fluid definition. So it's not always easy to be able to measure this aspect of effort, but particularly looking at individuals trying to be part of a system such as this, it helps them a lot to be able to draw into the wide type of benefits and incentives that are available to them. So we must make that link, and this is critical, that link between the performance and the interview must be made. Finally, the issue of the individual being able to show improvement on their task and also on their issues such as the quest for performance must also be taken into consideration. I mean, consultation becomes important of telling people what are the most important things they need to know and how these feature as issues that need attention and scrutiny to be able to allow the individual to improve. It gets a bit tricky because prior to the pandemic, we were moving towards a lot of team-based organization where people work together as a team, and in them working together as a team, they must also be rewarded according to the composition of their different teams. Think of this as a group assignment. If we had a group assignment for this module, which we don't, but let's say we did, over the years in the modules where I've taught at 48, where we've had group assignments, I found these to often create challenges and fights amongst people because some people just don't see the value of group assignments. They or group-based assessment, they are more driven by individual processes. They are more driven by the focus and the move away from the other to the to a group-based system. And it has its merit because you've heard of the word acronym team. Together, everyone achieves more. There's benefit in working together, but also there are drawbacks in terms when the system of compensation becomes a bit unfair to one person, and that creates more talk and anxiety amongst people. So when we go further, we then allow teams to have autonomy to be able to somewhat determine what they want to achieve. And we're not saying that they do what they want. All we're simply saying here is that let's allow teams the freedom to be able to determine in what way they would like to be seen to be working towards the range of tasks that are before them. So the team members also can work interdependently, but not necessarily independently. We make it very clear that what we want the team members to do is to be able to work together to achieve the range of objectives that they want. Teams, therefore, become established and have developed to be at the performing stage of the group life cycle. The group life cycle, if you remember, has got stages like forming, norming, performing, adjourning. So once we get to the teams part, we know that we are now in a position where we are able to really see the team at its most optimum and most effectiveness. Finally, individual members of those teams are therefore then given the responsibility to not only choose their own teams, but to also be flexible, to also be multi-skilled, and to be able to pay attention to the composition of the range of team members that they would like to put in front of them and the work that they must do. And so examples, therefore, of non-financial rewards, these are rewards that are not monetized. A praise, if you go to some restaurants, you will see them being deliberate in having a section where they say this is the section where it's for the employee of the month. If you go to some restaurants, you go to a section where they say this is the person who has achieved the most targets. And then what they then do is then they praise you for being able to do such efforts. So praise, recognition are also examples of non-financial rewards. We also pay attention to opportunities for growth and promotion as an incentive to try and dangle to people to say, look, we want you to be able to be better. So we look out for and we try to create as many opportunities that you can grow and you can be promoted. We then can also pay attention to a model which is called the job characteristics model, which simply says that, listen, we can enrich the job. And when we try to enrich the job, we then try to increase the aspects related to the job that is being done so that people find that enjoyable. And when they find it enjoyable, they are able to perform better and also enjoy their work. Private recognition, where people are acknowledged not necessarily in public, but they're also recognized in private setting of saying, listen, we are so proud of the work that you are doing. We can also have examples of ways in which we set ourselves a focus on the type of rewards that we're trying to work towards. And these are the last set of slides. These includes paying attention to financial rewards, which we've spoken about, performance bonuses, a piece rate system. This is often used in manufacturing, sometimes called the agile manufacturing context, where we try to raise productivity, and therefore a reward is given for a quantity of productivity that is measured, and then that reward is then used as a way of incentivizing people. We also have profit and gain sharing, where we say to people, if a profit is accrued, the company then allows people to be able to share whatever is in excess, including the excess that is accrued as the profit. The suggestion schemes, these provide a financial reward to the groups and individuals. Suggestions either increase company revenue or they reduce the costs. So what we have then is a mechanism through which individuals can actually determine the type of schemes that they belong to, and then they've got an option, and then these are used to determine what they want. We also have employee share options, where employees buy shares and stocks that are within the company, and these are then used as ways of making employees co-owners of the business. And by allowing them to be co-owners of the business, you are allowing them to work directly to the success of the business, so that there are links to what is being achieved. So we end then on looking at the the legal considerations. Remember the laws that we covered when we started. We called these laws substantive acts. We called them acts related to the labor context. We first look at these laws and how they influence the activities that we want. One of them is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. This allows us to be able to know when and how we pay people. The BCA states that. It provides written particulars on the pay slip and where deductions are permissible and at what rate of these deductions are happening. If there's overtime, I mean, when you read the BCA, there's also a whole section on pay, on time rather, and this helps us to be able to know what we can and cannot do. It gives us effort with regards to payments of overtime, what we can pay and cannot pay. So focus is more directed towards some form of order in terms of what the organization can do and cannot do. We then go to unemployment legislation. Because of the high unemployment rate in the country, we also have issues related to making sure that UIA, the allowance around UIF and is made. So that 1% reduction, making sure that it's is put in per the gross earnings of an employee and that contribution. And we'll cover that tomorrow when we look at the training and development function. We also have other legal considerations that are given imperative over by law. Deductions of tax, everybody must pay tax or tax contribution, pension, medical aid, and these are all enshrined within the range of edicts that we have within the labor system. The Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Employment Equity Act, how much can we pay, what constitutes discrimination and unfair discrimination with regard to pay. So then we could have a collective agreement which could say, we as the employees within the mining sector or the wine sector, which is a seasonal sector, this is the minimum wage that we expect to be paid. So in essence, organizations need therefore to adhere to laws, as these provide useful information into what is deemed permissible or not. We also have those other considerations which are internal and external that we must pay attention to, and these also need attention. And also the idea of the ever-changing global context. The global environment also is now playing a part into determining what pay should look like. And it's not always easy, but it must be said that we are living in an ever-changing global context. So there was a lot to cover in this class, but we have managed to now look at issues related to compensation. I would also urge you to go and look at the questions that are on page 399 in your text, which are the multiple choice questions. There are 10 nice questions there, and maybe you might see them in your case study, maybe, but I also urge you to have a look at those questions. Do we have any questions or comments? We're now left with two chapters, the chapter on training and development and learning, and then the last chapter, which will be the chapter on conduct and the challenges related to the employment legislation. How do we resolve disputes as they arise? Any questions anybody would like to ask before we end the class? I hope it was clear. And I also hope that you have started with your assignments and that you are following through with your questions related to the case studies, which are, some of them just go to the back of your textbook. You will find some of those questions there. And I also hope that you are following through the videos, which are available on Blackboard and on YouTube. Please don't just rely on studying the slides. Have a look at the book, because we've made it very purposeful and intentional that the slides and the classes that we're having are just summaries of chapters. So please also have a look at the topic covered in the book. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And once again, by 6 o'clock, the video will be available on Blackboard. And also, I wish you well as you prepare for the assessments. And so please, before you want to call me, please first read the learner guide. That will always help. Somebody thought that the assignment was due on Monday, but read the learner guide. It will probably answer most of the questions that you have before you panic and start to contact me. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great evening.